Greetings and felicitations, dear audience. I am in McCombs. Today we're going to continue with my worst books ever series. Today I've pared down my intro even more. I've set phasers to disintegrate, so let's roll that intro. Salutations and admirations, dear audience. Let's talk about 5 good things and 5 bad things I did with book 4. This is not going to be as fluffy as some of my previous videos. Instead, I'd like to concentrate not only on what I did wrong, but also how you can fix your book if you have the same problems with what I did right. I'd like to show you how you can use those pieces of advice that I learned to help your writing. Number 5 good thing, I had written down and planned what this story was going to be about. In previous books, I thought I was a discovery writer, but after reading and researching all of my how to write books, I decided to try a different tactic. I did an outline of the story, I did an outline of the plot, I did an outline of the theme, I did an outline of all the things. Number 5 bad thing, I outlined all the things. My outlines were so restrictive and were essentially sentence by sentence guides of what I was writing per scene and chapter that my creative juices were completely locked. So sure, I wrote the book and the book didn't mean that much to me. I had written 66,000 words. The characters I thought were great, but the plot and the dialogue and the setting was kind of boring. Number 5, help. Do you like making grocery lists and that excites you when you go into the grocery store, or maybe a work presentation or a school presentation? You write down all the information about it and it makes you relieved. When you write, are you writing down notes about what you've already written or what you want to write in the future? Then you might be an outlining writer. However, do you make a to-do list and it makes you depressed? Does writing out all the information about that school paper or the work presentation leave you cold and you just want to watch TV? When you write, is discovering the story as you're writing it way more interesting and more fun than when you originally thought of the idea? You might be a discovery writer. Decide which you are. More importantly, try it out. You may not know until you've written stuff, so you have to write stuff. It's not about what you hope works, but what actually works. Please tell me in the basement comments which you are and why. Number 4 good thing, I stabilized the world building of the books that I had written, book 1 through book 6. Yes, there are 6 books in this universe. The last book I wrote was pretty good, and I'm reading it right now, and I'm really impressed by it. It has problems, but every book does, and I'm gonna give it a good edit, and hopefully it'll be top-notch. I figured out from book 4 what made this universe work. Suddenly, questions I had about my own world were answered. Number 4 bad thing, I added way too many random things that I thought were cool instead of honing down just a few things that were really awesome. If you try to make 3,000 cool things in your book, you'll end up with 3,000 dumb, confusing, or not important things. Instead, concentrate on one thing per scene. It can be a set piece for your setting, it can be a background story, a side character, your main character's conflict. One thing, make it important, not 20 per scene. Number 4, help. Imagine or write down what your world is about. I don't mean the way the universe or the world was made or founded, but what is the story message, the story idea, or the theme of the world you're trying to tell the reader? What important message do you want your reader to really understand when they close your book? For me, my books in this world, the theme is no matter how terrible you are, nor how many awful things you've done, you can always do better to be better. Once I figured that out, the next several books in this universe were much clearer. They resonate more. In my most recent book, I just talked about it. I realized it was from NaNoWriMo 2018. This story and idea were everywhere in the book, so it really resonated and it really means a lot through the story. It's very hope punk that way. Number 3 bad thing, terrible, boring, middle again. Yes, again. I put this in the middle because the middle was terrible again. It was boring, it was pointless, and didn't raise any tension. Instead, I put a bunch of false tension, which means the scenes were a little bit tense, but it didn't carry over to other scenes or chapters. I totally flinched out on the plot that I created, which was an evil, terrible, awful plot. But instead of writing it, I just changed that one thing and it ruined the book. So the middle being terrible, again, one of my weakest points. Number 3, good thing. My plot actually had a clear through line of theme and reason. Before, my books were essentially collections of scenes that didn't really connect. This time, due to my learning from Scene and Structure, the videos that I had done just previously, I could at least connect these scenes together and make the chapters somewhat make sense together so the plot went through. Number 3 fix. Every scene should have a reason to be read. Each scene should have a goal your viewpoint character or your protagonist wants. Each scene should have an antagonist who is going to conflict against your protagonist to make sure your protagonist doesn't get that. Lastly, your scene should have a disaster where your antagonist maybe gets what they want, your hero doesn't, or if they do, it comes at some evil cost. This is in my Scene and Structure video 1, which I'll link up here. Secondly, I linked my scenes together by sequels. Once the scene has played out and your disaster happens, you have an emotional reaction to that disaster. Then there is a thought of the protagonist about that disaster and the emotion that they're feeling. Then they make a decision about what their next step is going to be to get their story goal. Last, they make an action about that decision about what they're going to do for the next goal in their next scene. I'll link my sequel video up here as well. Number 2 bad thing, my climax was pretty epic, but it wasn't foreshadowed enough, nor were the seeds of the climax planted in previous scenes and chapters. I had great intentions, but when everything came together at the end, it seemed like it was out of left field. Had I made the conflict more evil and terrible, then the surprises of the ending would have felt more worthy and the ending would have felt a lot better. Number 2 good thing, I had a climax and ending that made a bit of sense. The story flowing to the end made sense, but the climax suffered from my terrible middle. The climax itself was pretty good on its own merits. There is struggle, there is sacrifice, there's bad parts, there's good parts. It has a roller coaster effect. Boom, it comes together, but it's a bit random. Number 2 fix. Plant the seeds of your ending all along the book. Here's one of those problems of writing where I'm going to spill the sausage, the sewer cleaning, so I'm about to spoil some writing craft. Spoilers for all your favorite well-written books. If you have a surprise group of heroes coming to help and they're going to save the day, foreshadow it. Show them being good people, they want to help the hero, they're with the hero's cause. Then, when the day is lost, they ride in to save the day. If a betrayal happens in the ranks of the evil, then show the cracks happening. Show how the evil bad guys' goals don't agree with the evil lieutenant who will betray him. Thus, at the end, it makes sense. Add the twist, show, don't tell, that is going to happen in the future and how they're going to help the hero later. Then have all the plants kill all the zombies. Number 1 good and bad thing, and it's totally not a cop-out, I swear, but I'm going to repeat it since it's very true. Like number 5, number 1 is I planned so much of the book that it was not enjoyable to write. Let me show you the lengths of which I had done planning for each chapter and scene. I went from one extreme, thought I was a complete discovery writer, to the exact opposite extreme where I outlined every single thing. So let's look at this list right here. We have viewpoint character, which is pretty obvious. This is going to be your antagonist, the person who's going to be telling from that viewpoint and who's essentially the hero. Setting, this is the specific location of this scene. So it could be, your city, or your hellscape, or your sci-fi space station, whatever. And then the setting set piece is one really amazing, interesting, something that you're going to describe to your reader so they really get a sense of place in your book. Antagonist, same thing. You should know who this is, the person who says no. Goal, obvious. In this scene, what does the hero want to achieve? What is the hero going after? Conflict. Why is there a conflict between your antagonist and your hero? So that leads us to the next point, obviously. Antagonist, reason. What reason are they going against your hero? Disaster, what actually happens to make things worse for your hero? And the disaster reason. Maybe the hero was too prideful, maybe the hero messed up earlier and that caused a cascading issue. You kind of have a real reason for it, so it makes sense. Side character. Does the side character have a goal? Are there multiple side characters in your story? Who are they? What do they want? And then we go through the sequel. This is what's going to happen at the end of this scene to lead into your next scene. The emotion from the disaster, thought about the emotion and the disaster, the decision to move on, and the action they're going to take. Now this last bit is, how does this relate to your story arc, that original goal, and the new action, relation to your theme, and then also if you had something to foreshadow, you have a seed here to actually add in so it makes sense in your climax. There's actually something new I added because I thought, hey, since I just talked about that a little bit, why not add it into an outline? This really isn't that bad. Looking back on it, back then it was terrible, but now it's not that terrible. It plans out everything I need. It shows me what I'm going to write about in that scene. And the problem is the past, that I wrote so much about this that I felt constrained by it that I didn't want to write. However, now, that might actually be really helpful. When I did this in the past, I almost wrote 2 pages per scene, so essentially the whole scene was almost already written. So had I written just a little bit, maybe a word, a couple words, a little sentence, a little blurb, it would have been a lot better and it would have constrained me. In other words, I learned what worked for me. I learned how to connect scenes. I learned why chapters are the way they are. First and foremost, as I've said before, and I'll say it again 100 times, writing is about what works. For you, not me, not anyone else, but you. Sure, there are certain good ideas to help with that are held in high regard, but breaking them can be very well done if you make an amazing impact on it when you've done it right. When I've done it wrong, well, you get every book I've written so far. I hope you found this video enlightening and helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody, subscribe, and I very much want to thank you for watching and listening, and may your creative endeavors bring you peace, love, and happiness.